So this is the trophy that I got as the winner for Mr. Gay India 2019. And these are some of the other trophies that I won as part of the competition for the Sports Challenge, People Choice Award, and which is the other one, sorry. The Social Media Campaign Award. As I was growing up, the society and the people around me started stereotyping me for my mannerisms, for my behavior. Not a very happy childhood. Majority of the times it was putting myself down, crying my heart out, and not being true to myself. And there were times when I did try to take my life.
I have faced stigma, discrimination, and perhaps abuse at some point. There's sometimes that I would just go and not speak to anyone and just go to my room and cry. I remember I was not offered the job because of my sexuality, because apparently I will not represent the organization correctly. So that was very harsh for me.
I never told my family about the levels of violence that I experienced. Years and years, I was being mocked, insulted, threatened with harm for being myself. Experiencing that kind of violence, be it physical or psychological, left a deep imprint about my ability to trust people in their sincerity in what they say and what they do.
There was violence happening to me, pulling my hair down on the floor, and started to beat me. I didn't report anything to the police, but I keep it inside. It's okay for them to hurt me or beat me up because the way I am.
Me and my partner, we were verbally and physically attacked. 3 guys followed us around the corner and they literally start throwing stones at us. That was a crime. We didn't report it because at that point in time, you were even scared to approach the police because the department itself was homophobic. After that incident, I'm like, I'm gay, whether you like it or not.
When you're an activist as well, you are prominent. So, your face is in the newspapers, on TV, people know you. So when they know you, then they target you. People have tried to pull me out of my car and beat me up. I have to be constantly aware of where I am. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. I've got CCTV cameras all over my house. I've got CCTV cameras all over my office. I have a CCTV camera in my car. And when you have to live like that on a daily basis, it wears you down.
We are an extremely patriarchal society, and nothing challenges patriarchy more than a woman saying that she wants to be with another woman and she doesn't need a man. And I believe if you're a lesbian in this culture, you are at the bottom end of the totem pole. It's wherever you look, we don't know how to raise our voice and therefore are complicit in what's happening.
When I look around the world, in each country, in each district, in each city, in each town and each village, there are people that are gay. I won't go back in the closet for anyone. Enough is enough. We need to stand up for our rights and speak out.
We have an endemic problem of violence in our continent, and structurally it affects many minorities, including women, refugees, children, persons who are marginalized. The African Commission has required all African states to enact legislation to prevent these incidences of violence. We can speak informally, complain. The law needs to be the place where we begin our response mechanism. Because the law is for everyone, rich, poor, urban, rural, gay, straight. We know we can do better. If we are honest with ourselves, we can do better.
The Constitution, it's about protecting vulnerable minorities, marginalized people. In Kenya today, it's very common for people to take the law into their hands. They lynch, they kill people. It happens on a daily basis.
I'm a co-founder and the current vice chairperson of LGBTIC, an NGO working for the rights of people who are in the LGBTIQ community in the Seychelles. I think it started quite a while back. When I joined the activism world back in 2011, I just felt the need to contribute to my country. People, especially when they don't know their right or where to go, they accept this kind of violence. We want to take it up to the government to say, look, let's look at our protective laws. Are they really protective? So that's why one of the major programs that we want to put in place is this, ensuring that we are protected by law when it comes to hate crimes.
So I'm going to meet Kim Simplice. She's a special envoy for women and children, and she's our champion for hate crime legislation. And if we can get that through, we would have raised the international bar on what human rights look like for small countries.
We're currently working on the anti-discrimination campaign, Live and Let Live. And the reason we're doing that really is because we're trying to tie it in to the new piece of legislation that we're currently working on, which is the anti-discrimination and hate crime legislation. Under the hate crime comes stiffer penalties because you did it deliberately, because this person is a Catholic, because this person is an LGBT member. It tells victims that you're protected under the law and that this is wrong and that it is unacceptable. It really takes you from being a victim to a survivor, and that in itself is powerful.
Until we become visible in law, we will not be complete citizens. And so it's my hope that the hate crime legislation that is being developed or discussed will reach Parliament in a few months and finally bring us into the fold.
Human rights are human rights. It's not religion, it's not political, it's human rights. I've got my right to dignity, I've got my right to privacy, I've got my right to love and accept love. So it's as simple as that.
I joined the Human Dignity Trust in 2012, so I've been with the Trust for almost a decade. The Human Dignity Trust is an organization of international lawyers working around the world with civil society organizations and local lawyers who are seeking to eradicate laws that criminalize LGBT people. And we also work with governments where they want to voluntarily reform these laws. LGBT people are criminalized in over 70 countries around the world today. All of those jurisdictions criminalize men, and over 40 of them criminalize women. In almost a dozen of those countries, the death penalty can be imposed for same-sex intimacy. And those laws exist because of either religious law, through Islamic Sharia law, for instance, or through British colonial laws that were spread around the world during colonial times. And these laws create today an ongoing environment of stigma, discrimination, and violence. They also enable, in some countries, the authorities to arrest, detain, prosecute, and incarcerate LGBT people simply for engaging in consensual sexual conduct in their own home.
We've had references to homosexuality in all of our epics. It's not new to our culture. But clearly at some point, and it could be with influences that did come into this country, whether it was Islamic or Judeo-Christian influences, things changed.
So we had the drag culture in India. We see that in all our old history and places in the Hindu mythology where some of the gods went ahead and transformed into opposite sex.
Homosexuality was quietly tolerated in the pre-colonial period. It was introduced in our Penal Code, Section 169, that we are challenging, by the British, who first enacted it in India. From India, it came to Kenya. So it's a colonial piece of legislation.
At the height of British imperialism, British laws, the common law, was being exported to Britain's colonial states, and in many cases those laws remain on the statute books today. And those laws reflect the times in which they were made, 17th, 18th century laws, and attitudes towards women and girls and other marginalised groups, for example, LGBTIQ people, people with disability.
People with disability are referred to as imbeciles and idiots, for instance, in many of these penal codes, and they're completely criminalized, or any sort of sexual conduct with them is criminalized. Transgender people are subjected to criminalization through additional laws that criminalize, for instance, cross-dressing or impersonation. Similarly, laws criminalizing vagrancy or public disorder are often used specifically to target trans people.
This criminal code that we inherited was filled with antiquated laws and did not reflect who we are as a people, who we wanted to become as a people. These laws exist all over, and it's prejudicial. I think it's important that the Commonwealth really start looking seriously at their legislations and what they have. If you really looking to protect all people, then that's where you need to start.
These laws put LGBT people on the margins of society across the board, in healthcare, in housing, in education, in social services.
Conduct between two consenting adults in private. Don't go there intruding into their bedroom. Don't criminalize it. Don't discriminate them.
These laws are actually part of a whole package of laws that are discriminatory and that were written in Victorian English times that exist within the sexual offences provisions of a criminal code. The failure to properly protect women and girls, for instance, against rape and sexual violence is another problem that has to be addressed through reform of these laws. Victims of violence are not being adequately protected and perpetrators are not being adequately prosecuted.
The UN has described violence against women and girls as a global pandemic. Rates are very high everywhere, and law is one very important tool in both preventing and addressing violence against women and girls and sexual violence.
Jan Sahas started in year 2000, and we are basically working on the issue related to violence against women and girls. We are supporting more than 14,000 women and girls who are raped or they faced sexual violence, trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation.
9,000 केस जो है वो माइनर्स के हैं और बाकी जो मामले हैं वो अडल्ट महिलाओं के हैं। किसी ने बलात्कार किया है तो उसको सज़ा मिलनी चाहिए। ये तो एक है कि ये जस्टिस हुआ, लेकिन दूसरा हमको सर्वाइवर की नज़र से देखना पड़ेगा कि उसके क्या मायने हैं जस्टिस के। क्योंकि अगर हम देखें पूरा जो सोशल या सोसाइटी में जो स्टिग्मा है कि बलात्कार के बाद इज्जत चली गई, बदनामी हो गई, है ना, वो पूरा समाज से एक्सक्लूड हो जाती है वो एक फैमिली।
जो मैंने किसी को पहले तो बताया नहीं था क्योंकि काफ़ी गिल्टी फील होती थी उस घटना के बारे में बताने के लिए, और मेरे साथ में रेप की घटना हुई थी और उस टाइम पे मैं काफ़ी परेशान थी। मैंने तो जो स्ट्रगल किया उसके हिसाब से मैं बता रही हूँ कि पुलिस इतनी मदद नहीं करते, और वहीं पर ये केस जो रेप केसेस है वो काफ़ी बहुत वैसे तो निकल के आते ही नहीं हैं, क्योंकि इंडिया में और जो गांव का जो विलेज में अधिकतर ये कंडीशन है कि अगर किसी लड़की के साथ में इस तरीके की घटना घटित होती है तो समाज में उससे शादी कोई नहीं करता है।
Powerful laws are playing a very crucial role for changing the practices in the society, especially related to the rape or sexual violence.
One of the most recurrent forms of violence is usually perpetrated in private spaces, in home spaces. Marital rape, forced impregnation, domestic violence and abuse, intimate partner violence. Most of these violence is not reported, or it's not even recognized as a crime.
The Indian Penal Code is quite comprehensive. If you look at the exception to the provision of rape, sexual intercourse by a man with his own wife is not rape.
Came from the British colonial law, based on the idea that the woman is the property of the man, and therefore he can do what he wants with his property.
We don't think that rape can happen within marriage, right? So of course it's that much hard for women.
Niko na wasichana wawili, naomba hiyo sipendi wakuja wapitia vile dhulma zenye mimi nilipata ndani ya ndoa. Wakati nilipata huyu mtoto wangu kanyema, hapo ndio shida yangu ilianza sasa kabisa. Sasa vile nilirepiwa, sikujua niweza kuenda wapi. Kwambia yeye ako na right kwako, anaweza kufanya anytime yenye anapata. Kuna alama hata hapa hiyo dhulma ya kuchapwa ya kisu. Ataenda huko, nini lawyer, atasimama nao, abebe, hiyo kesi itaenda hivi. Lakini kama inaweza kuenda vizuri, nipate justice, ashikwe, apanish, inaweza kufanya hata watu wengine pia wawache hiyo tabia kudhulumu wanawake.
We've had so many cases where the judge's hands were tied And when we ask or we inquire, why did this perpetrator isn't being punished? Why is he just being fined? It always came back to the criminal code and interpretation and the limitations of this criminal code.
In terms of who is harmed by these laws, of course you have the victim survivor and then their family and broader communities, because the laws prevent them from accessing justice and often cause re-traumatisation, and really crucially let the perpetrator evade justice. And that undermines trust in the formal justice system, and the rule of law and access to justice are critical elements in a stable society. So the whole community suffers. All the global data really emphasises that the numbers are very disproportionate towards women and girls being the victims and survivors. Of course, sexual violence also is committed against men and boys.
I just think that rape has to be gender neutral. It's crazy that we have a rape law which assumes that only men can rape women.
In India, more than 72% population face sexual violence in their lives, including men and boys. Before 2013, oral rape or rape with object was not covered into the definition.
Well, it's a shocking incident of brutal rape in the capital. A case that's evoked national outrage.
They say that maybe that an instrument was inserted, or maybe that...
We want justice for the 23-year-old rape survivor.
So the government learned lots of things from that case, and government added rape with objects in the Indian Penal Code. All these components are very useful for the survivors, for justice as well as the rehabilitation of the survivors.
They've taken one step forward. They've broadened the notion of sexual intercourse to include all forms of penetration. They've not taken the two other steps forward, which is the idea of criminalizing marital rape and the idea of criminalizing non-consensual penetrative intercourse with all persons, not just women.
Lesbians, for instance, are often subjected to so-called corrective rape, or they're subjected to forced marriages to men. They're also subjected more to familial violence.
Such cases comes in where you report against the family for corrective rape. Then the police also booked you for unnatural sex. So largely because of that, the LGBTQ community did not come up and say that rape has happened.
There's no serious investigation by authorities to such issues, and it becomes worse if the person who's the victim is a lesbian or a sexual minority. So not only are they violated in these private spaces, but they are also largely disinherited by their communities, disowned by their families. Children are taken away from them.
For those brave ones who were able to report a crime and not get the justice that they deserved, that they needed, it was the re-victimization of the victim. And we really can't allow that to continue.
केसेस में हम लोगों ने देखा जिसमें वो सुसाइड अटेम्प्ट करती हैं या फिर वो पहले जैसे थी वैसे बिल्कुल भी नहीं रहती है, तो बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है उसको उसकी वापस से पहले जैसी ज़िंदगी में लेके आना, और वो जस्टिस मिलेगा, आरोपी जेल में जाएगा, लेकिन वो सर्वाइवर अगर उसकी ज़िंदगी में वापस आ जाती है तो वो हमारे लिए बहुत बड़ा अचीवमेंट है।
Anyone who is raping may bring up any kind of justification for raping. But the fact remains is very simple, that individuals have a right over their body. They have a right to say no, and that needs to be respected.
quite a few countries that have reformed their laws, and they've really made significant effort to bring laws up to date and, importantly, to make them compliant or consistent with their human rights obligations under international law.
What we've had was a revamping, significant revamping of the criminal code with regards to rendering rape gender neutral, with regards to an object being used to rape a person, with regards to equalizing the age of consent.
Updating our criminal code was such a powerful message to all Belizeans. We're trying to destigmatize sexual violence and make it real that it does happen and it's been happening forever. And so what we're seeing now is an increase in the reporting of these crimes and an increase in the prosecuting of these crimes.
It was former President James Michel's State of the Nation address in the Assembly in which he mentioned that Seychelles had become so tolerant that it was really anathema to our society to still criminalize homosexual acts. Seychelles had the reviews by the United Nations, and in 2011, Seychelles made that commitment that it would decriminalize.
I think inevitably, reform must come from Parliament. We had signed up to a number of conventions, and pressure was being applied to live up to what we had signed up to.
The Constitution of Seychelles makes provision for all persons to be free from discrimination on all grounds.
And boom, it was done. And that's it. You know, it was actually very quick and pretty painless.
It takes guts, boldness for somebody, a president, to acknowledge that we are not a transphobic or homophobic country, to actually ascend the law. I mean, if you look at the world, how many head of states have actually done that? Like, I felt like there was this heaviness that came off.
Shoot. It is difficult, but I think it is very important for us to go through all of that. There are going to be people that we're going to lose, but I think keeping the story going forward is very important.
What I will tell any other government in any other country, work for the marginalized people within your society, because that community is one that suffers the most. Pass law and legislation that will minimize some of the problems that activists face, and finally we'll be able to relax and enjoy our life.
The biggest challenge is the same for any area, I would say, and that's cultural and social change. It takes a long time and is really the hardest part of this project. But without it, the law can never really be fully effective, can never really do what it's intended to do. Absolutely you need both. One without the other won't work, and we have many, many examples of that. We need legislative change, and we need to work on changing community and social attitudes.
If you want to get the best out of people in their work or their life, the more inclusive and non-discriminatory you are, the better it is for everybody. As a society, we need to start teaching young people how to respect differences, how to understand inclusion. And this has to do with everything, not just sexual minorities. I'm talking about how do young kids learn to respect women? How do young boys learn to respect women?
It's change locally that ensures that we join the wider community. And you've got to constantly be pushing for that. So you mustn't look at it simply as a gender or as a transgender or as a gay rights issue, but as a transformative issue for the whole of society.
of people who have moved to countries of, greener pastures to find places where they can really live and be themselves. But I think I'm in that space, or I want that to happen in my country, in my place, right? So it is going to be difficult, no doubt. But I know that probably for the future generations where they don't have that privilege of moving out of the country, but they have to survive in this country, why can't we make that a better place for them?